Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Community webinar. My name is Shane and I'm delighted to be joined by Rory Neary, Microsoft Business Applications Specialist, Data Spinners Limited, United Kingdom, who will be talking to you today about storytelling using the Power Platform. Remember to join the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC20. Don't forget to check out the Resource Center. This is updated daily with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. Simply visit sharepointeurope.com and click the content link at the top. After the webinar, we will have a questions and answers session. Type any questions you have for Rory in the questions window. Questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Center, where you will be notified by email when it is available. And now I'm going to pass you over to our webinar presenter, Rory Neary. Hello, Rory.
Oh, hi there, everyone. I'm just going to sort my screen out. Can you see me okay?
I can see you, Rory.
Fantastic. Really excited to be talking to you about storytelling today. I'm going to show can you see my screen at the moment?
Not yet, Rory. So hopefully you can start sharing. Or did
Great. So I'm going to get my screen up.
See it now.
Excellent.
Great. Take it away, Rory.
Brilliant. Okay. Hello, everyone. Please get involved in the chat. I'll be very, very interested in your thoughts on storytelling and what my take is on it. I'm not even going to present myself as an expert on storytelling. You won't find any me writing books anytime soon. So I thought what I'll do is I'll do a little bit, I'll do an introduction to the session. I'll tell you a bit about me, and then I'll kind of work my way into this presentation, if that's okay. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is just do a quick hop, skip, and a jump through myself. Now I'm just going to F11 this. That should go nice for us. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about me. Now, I guess the first thing to know on this is that there will not be any slides in this presentation. Everything that you see is essentially a Power App, and it is a Power App which is backed off into a series of common data service entities. So obviously, if you've got any questions on that, I'll be more than happy to field those queries. So I think one of the nice things about this is that every button click, every time you see something happen, it's all happening in Power Apps. So be great to see if there are any people that like Power Apps and so on. Anyone excited about it? Because I am. I think it's brilliant. So I'm going to jump in a little bit about myself. So my name is Rory Neary, and I'm a Microsoft Business Applications MVP. I've been an accountant for over 20 years until most recently, so it was about 4 or so years ago. As I say, I most recently transferred to Office 365. So my journey was one where I effectively went from being an accountant to Excel to Power Query, then from Power Query to Power Pivot, and then the two of those together essentially form Power BI. When Power BI kind of does all the visuals and so on, and then I moved in from Power BI from there into Office 365 and into Power Apps and Flow and so on and so forth. So I think in Power Apps, I did a session recently with Daniel Christian, and he's a kind of veteran of Power Apps, and he's been doing it 4 years. And when he started with it, it was actually it wasn't even in its, I don't think it even had the same name at this point. I'm just looking at my slide here, and so my story, if you like, is that I got to the point with accountancy and I just had enough. I didn't do as much paper as this person here, but I just had enough of it. It was just like, oh, why are we doing this and so on. So wow, pretty quick. So I got to the point with accountancy where it was a low point. I had enough, and I wasn't honestly sure what to do next. And I moved into, I just kind of morphed my way into Office 365 and so on. And then since then, I've got a YouTube channel. By all means, subscribe to it and so on. I've got lots of subscribers and so on. And look, if you like them, great, like them. And if you don't, then there are lots of great YouTubers out there. So lots of videos on there, principally about Power Apps. I've done training across Europe, which has been interesting, mainly because they let me do it. And in December of last year, I became an MVP, which is, bear in mind, I don't have a huge amount of qualifications in this space. It was a pretty big deal for me. And then recently, I presented at Ignite 2020. So enough about me. So we're gonna kind of switch. And we're going to do storytelling now. So we're going to do the storytelling. So first of all, I'm going to do an introduction. Then I'm going to do something about revelations. And anyway, so I'm just going to dive straight in. So this is my story about. It's my introduction. So this is the. I'm so pleased to actually be doing this. Actually, I love doing things about storytelling, and I think that there's just so many arms and legs to storytelling. I just think that. You can do recipes, anything. That everything's a story. So stories. I just think, as I say, I just find the idea, and even it's so sad. I'm an accountant, so even like I can just imagine like a transaction going through a set of accounts. It does have a little story, and all the way through to you providing the service, and it's someone finally getting paid and so on. I think you can abstract the idea of stories. To me, you can quite easily abstract them, so they don't have to be necessarily storybook type stories. So and yes, the stories can take us anywhere. This is Data Spinners. This is a really rubbish logo actually, but it's actually the logo where it's hidden in the background and what have you. So Data Spinners, this was ages ago where I created this logo and so on. I was thinking about insight and how stories can give us insights, and now I'm now kind of maybe changing my ideas about insight, and I'm thinking that actionable insight is even better than insight, because insight is kind of good, but we'll see how that develops through the presentation. And the other thing about stories is they are daunting. This is actually a slide that I use whenever I do training, and I say, do you know what? People are kind of like, people are a little bit, I'm gonna say scared of the platform, but they're a bit like, oh crikey, more things to learn, and look, I get it too. So don't be surprised if that's the way you kind of feel when you see all this stuff that you got to learn and so on. So this is Bilbo, who's about to go on this great big journey, and he's not too sure about what to do next. So I'd say that mine started years ago. I'm just going to do the sign in. So this is actually Power BI that we're going to be looking at here. So so I wouldn't necessarily say that. I mean, when I worked as an accountant, I do hope this works. When I worked as an accountant, I'm just going to. Sometimes you get a little bit of a fun and games on this. So I'm going to go back and forth. I think when I go back and forth, it will sort itself out. There we are. Here it comes. So when I worked as an accountant, I literally didn't do a single graphic in that time. I'm just going to do my little thing here. I'm going to move. There we are. So this, what we're looking at here, whilst I kind of plug for a bit of time, is we are looking at a Power BI report embedded within a Power App. And it's really cool. I've got a whole load of stuff about it that you can do to learn about this. And the point about this is that there was something about even the Power BI reports that something didn't quite work for me and so on, and I didn't quite know what it was. and I then kind of thought, oh right, you know, I think the reports aren't telling the story and so on. And I don't know how many people out there use bookmarks. I'd be really interested in any feedback in terms of people using bookmarks and so on. But Power BI bookmarks are okay, but they only ever tell one story. But my reports weren't telling a story, so I was a bit disappointed with them. And this is an example of a report which is sitting in the Power BI blog, and it's about shark attacks. But even a report like this is only as good as the data that's included, and actually it doesn't necessarily provide actionable insight. And in some ways, what it does provide, once you look further at it, is maybe evidence that the data that you're looking at isn't necessarily that accurate. So, but certainly when you look at a Power BI report, you must ask the so what questions, like what, like so what, because a lot of Power BI reports are just interesting, and as were my own. I watched loads of TED Talks about storytelling. This is one of my favorites. So it's the magical science of storytelling. There is I'll show you something later on. I've got a web page where you can view this. And I also watched something by this lady here, Cole Nassenbauer-Knaflic. I'll talk a little bit more about this as well later. And so this kind of, I'm starting to pull things together, and I was thinking, well, how could I use the Power Platform to enable me to tell a story? So in terms of what we're looking at here, and I'm not going to go into too much technical details about how this works, we are looking at a a Power App with either images which are stored in Azure Blob Storage, or Power BI reports that are living in Power BI, and it's just using a tile URL. So I say just, it took me a while to do this, but hopefully you'll see it's quite cool. So the structure of the presentation is, what I'm going to do in the next section is I'm going to talk to you about like revelations, the things that gave me my light bulb moment. Then I'm going to do this story. It's kind of a fun story, Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat Part 1. And I'm going to stop the Joseph story, and I'm going to talk about history and science. I have actually done a story about the coronavirus and in relation to the tweets and so on by Donald Trump, and I think that's kind of interesting. I wasn't going to show it, but I think I'll hopefully show that. So history and science. Then I'm going to talk about basic story structure elements, things that might make your stories a little bit better, essentially. And then I'm going to go on to Joseph as a Technicolor Dreamcoat Part 2. And then I think then beyond that we'll kind of switch over to questions, and I'm happy to answer loads of questions and so on. So if you want to get to my website, this is where you go. And if you do go there, I just want to make the point that this on the website, then there are a couple of videos that I think are really important. There's some bits and pieces about what motivates people, and there's something which shows some of the technical bits about what we're looking at today. So am I on the right thing? No. So you can get to it there, and I think yeah. So Shane, I'm just gonna jump back. Do we have any questions for me to kind of pick up at this point in time?
No, nothing yet. Just people saying hello, Rory.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy. I'm happy with waves. Anything to make me think that I'm not just in my room talking to a camera. So I've kind of set the scene. So I'm now going to do the revelations, and I really want you to kind of this is really important, basically. So the revelations are really important because they gave me my light bulb moments. So here I go into the revelations. So here's the first one, and this one came from the lady Cole Nassenbauer-Knaflic, and in her video she talks about exploratory versus explanatory analysis. And I looked at that, I thought, oh, what the hell does that mean, and so on. And then it dawned on me, it finally dawned on me, that what Power BI does is exploratory analysis, and it does it really, really well. What it doesn't do well is it does not do explanatory analysis very well. And the reason why it doesn't do it is it lacks this storytelling capability. You can have bookmarks, but your bookmarks can only ever tell one story for a given scenario, and it doesn't look, they're okay, they're a bit yeah, whatever. They work for particular reasons, and I'd be really interested if there are people out there that do use bookmarks, and whether or not they kind of are life-changing for them and so on. So exploratory versus explanatory analysis. Explanatory analysis is explaining what it is the data is telling us. So and we will be doing some of that later. Power BI URLs. Now, I love these. I hope this thing is going to work, by the way. So Power BI URLs. So the tile URL, and I can actually get into this in some detail. So people, if you're interested in how Power Apps tile URLs work, make sure you put a question in there to say, hey, I'd like to find out about that, and because I can go into some detail on that. But essentially, I can navigate any part of any report and so on that I wish to. And so this is just one of them. So it's just a kind of banal report, this one. And so I learned how they work, essentially. Common data service relationships were really, really important. So obviously this is a SharePoint and etc. conference, but this, what we are looking at, sits on top of the common data service. So that was really important. And if you are interested in how those relationships work, please ask a question about that. Then, yep. For some reason, I then also did another one about tile URL. I don't need to talk about that anymore. And here's the thing about bookmarks. It's me about essentially saying, having a little bit of rant about bookmarks and saying, well, actually, they're not that good because they only ever tell one story. So they're a bit limited in their effectiveness. But what we're doing is I'm just sort of demonstrating I can just fire myself at many, many places at the same time. By the way, I'm quite far from the internet at the moment. So that's why it's not so good. By the way, this is actually a survey that I get people to do when they come on to the courses that I do. And what it does, it's a Microsoft form, and the form then feeds into an Azure SQL database via Flow, and it means that as soon as they've actually sent in their responses, we actually get a visual like this. And I always think that's such a cool way to start something. We're still on Revelations here. Oh, and this I should this, the reason why I did this, I don't know if are there any people know what this is actually from? Does anyone know? I hope you do. This is from a series called The IT Crowd, and he basically says that the box is the internet. But the reason why I do this, and I can't even demo it, is that I've got these flick buttons, and the reason why you've got the dots at the top here is that one of my buttons, which I don't know where it is, by the way, is listening for me to click this so it can advance the presentation. So essentially what this presentation is, it is a listening presentation that I can advance with the button. But I don't need to do that at the moment, and my button is elsewhere. But it was a really cool idea to create a listening app. So that was the flick buttons side of things. So they're my revelations. So what on earth did I do with all these revelations? Well, let's see where we go to now. So now I had my revelations. I then created this I'm going to call it a solution, which was made up of a series of common data service entities onto which I have put a Canvas app and a model-driven app. Just looking at the time here. So just to give you an idea what we've covered so far, if I go to the header here, and if I go to the story headers, then I've got lots of stories. You can actually see the number of lines that are in the story. So we'll just look at the introduction here. Let me see. Let me see, because I thought it was going to say Revelations. So I'll just jump into this one and just show you that there's the introduction, and if you go to related stories, then you can see all the elements of this. Yeah, there we are. So these are all of the line items that, you know, the basic. So can you see that Bilbo contract thing there? So this is what we were looking at when I was showing it to you. But of course, in data form, it's kind of boring, isn't it, really? So so that's what we're actually looking at here in every case. So I'm now going to jump back to the presentation, and now finally I'm going to show you, I'm going to tell the story of Joseph in his Technicolor Dreamcoat, part 1. Okay, so here we go. So part 1. So this is storytelling, and by the way, I have actually got a bit of music on here. Let me just see if it works. It probably won't. Okay, good. Enough of that. So Joseph in his Technicolor Dreamcoat. So this is me doing my little kind of theoretical production, and so here we go. So once upon a time in the land of Canaan, there lived Jacob and his 12 sons. So there was one son that Jacob loved more than the others. I am just reading this off, by the way, and this was Joseph. So he was loved more than others. He loved him so much that he gave him a coat of many colors, but it displeased his brothers greatly. So they tore off his coat and they were going to destroy him. But in a moment of compassion, they sold Joseph to a slaver. And we're starting to see some of the little indications I'm using to help me or help you with the story. There's the slaver being pointed to. Joseph was taken to Egypt, where he was enslaved to a rich man called Potiphar. But Joseph upset his new master because Potiphar's wife grew attracted to him. I don't really know why I chose this picture, but I did. Joseph was cast into a jail where he was sad, and he was very sad indeed. So there we are. I've just told a bit of a story. It is based, you know, we are looking at data here, if you sort of mean, but data that is held in an interesting fashion. So if I move to the next bit, we're now starting to get into some interesting pieces. And actually, I just think, I'm not sure. Let's just see what happens here. So I've got arrows going on here, but I think that something weird has happened and my arrows have gone to the back. So this will be interesting. I think they have gone to the back. Let's just see. So this is the story of Joseph. I have actually got a gray. Yeah. So hold on. But you know, this is a presentation. It's supposed to go wrong, isn't it? So there's my Canvas app, and I'm just going to go onto here, and I'm going to start it again. But this time I'm going to actually I'm in edit mode, which is kind of fun anyway, that you can actually go into this. What is this thing doing? I think that what's happened in this case is that my visual has gone in front of an arrow that I'm trying to present. So that's why I'm actually going to the trouble of actually doing this. I don't quite know why it's decided to do that, but it has. So I'm just going to jump through the presentation here. Okay, over we go. Keep going all the way to the end. So you can see the arrows are actually poking in here. So the idea with the arrows is you've got this indicator that you can move around the place and so on. You know, you can make it bigger and you can do this sort of thing. So this idea of maybe being able to work better with the help the users to view things a little bit more easily. So we're going to go next. Unfortunately, that's a huge image, so that's why it kind of takes a while to come in. However, the images are in Azure Blob Storage, which, by the way, is the best place to put things. So here we are. This is where my problem child is, and what I need to do is I need to get my arrow, and I need to make sure it sits at the front. So it's not behaving itself. I'll just go OK to that. OK to that. It is actually at the front, which is a bit strange. So I'm just going to right-click on that. Hello. There we are. Reorder. It's not very entertaining, is it? So reorder, bring to front. Good. That should be OK. No, it's not being happy. It's not being happy anyway. Never mind. But we can actually see it here. So I'm just going to basically pump up the volume and go with that. So I will just push the volume up here, and we will just work off this. So what I can actually do is I can go full screen on this. I can do lots of other things. So we are back on. So let's, from a data perspective, so we can see that we're pointing out what's going on here. And if I go to next, Alt. Thank you. So by the time he's enslaved as a low, and I'm using the arrows to sort of direct the person's sort of attention in a kind of new way. There are lots of interesting things that we can do with this, so we can actually resize things and so on. I'm not going to bother now just because it's a bit tricky. So by the time he's enslaved, he's at an all-time low and he's sent to jail. So I'm using Power Apps overlaid, which is overlaid to the Power BI visual, and I personally think it's interesting because I can have as many stories as I like with this. So when he's sent to jail, all is not lost. Two of the king's servants come along. As I say, I'm a bit far from the internet here for all this to happen, but the nature of this presentation is, you know, they are super easy to create. So Joseph is taken before the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh explains his dreams, and I'm not sure if I've gone all the way through to the end, but we'll see. The Pharaoh explains his dreams. I think I've jumped ahead actually, so we shouldn't be at this point just yet, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to the main part of the presentation. I'm going to jump back and I'm going to talk to you about storytelling, evolution, a bit of history and so on before we finish off the story. So I'm just going to time check. So any questions at this point, Shane?
We just have one question, and it is, how long has it taken you to make this presentation?
Well, funny enough, the presentations, what I'd quite like to do, the structure, if you like, of the presentation, as in doing the common data service, doing the app, all that sort of thing took a long time. But actually, the act of creating the presentation doesn't take that long, because if you want to create a new story, as I did this morning. So if I do a test 1, 2, 3, I can create a new story, and then if I just need to just so I mean, it's a bit of how long is a piece of string sort of thing. So if you want to like add an image into this new story that we've created, you just get an image there, and it'll just jump me over to another page, and I'll be able to enter one line of the story. So so it's going to kind of go and have a look at the pictures that I've got available to me, and essentially whether or not it's a Power BI report or whatever it is, all I need to do is just kind of I just need to kind of select one of those things, and then add it in, and then it just goes into my story. I can see it's not quite got woken up yet, but that's the general idea anyway. So but it's taken a while to put all the material together. So there's two sides. One is a technical side, and one is just an actual act of doing it. And yes, it has taken a while, but I enjoyed doing it. So anything else?
No, that's it for the moment, Rory.
Cool. So so I'm now going to do waiting for this thing to the thing to refresh, by the way. There we are. So storytelling and evolution, that's the bit, and this is an interesting piece here that for us to do. Yeah, like typical. So I can't get the arrow on one thing, but the arrow appears on here. Never mind. So now I'm moving into thinking about why stories? Who cares about stories? So in fact, I'm just going to go onto this thing here because that is bugging me. I'm just going to go on into indicator, and I'm just going to say no indicator, and then come off there and back onto play. So like mankind, when did it all happen? I was looking at something recently and about the cosmos and stuff, on like man appeared at like 11:59 on December the 31st. It's like we haven't been around for very long in reality. But I'm thinking about, when did this all happen? And I think that storytelling is a big part of why we've been successful. This is what they call the Olduvai hand axe. It's actually one of the oldest human tools that has been found. So it's about 2 million years old. And I just think if you tried to make one of these, it'd be really hard. So this is the upgrade to the thing that we just saw. So this is basically, it took 1 million years for them to think, hey, we need to make it slightly better shaped and so on. And I would love to make one of these one day, because I think that it would be a lot harder than you think. Think about, they needed to know how to make it. They needed to keep it with them. They needed to have tools. They needed to live in a place where they could actually get those sort of materials. I just think this is really fascinating to me, and this says something about how we evolved. And we evolved because we were able to make tools, and we were able to communicate and tell stories, and stories are how we communicate how how to be successful. And so this just shows how man expanded out from Africa. So storytelling and data. I'm actually not sure which one what visual is going to come up here. Probably not a very useful one, if I'm honest. So I'll wait for it to pop up. I'm actually, no, hold on. Let's see what it comes up with. So yeah, begs the question, what's it got to do with the reason why this one comes up, actually, it was one of my first Power BI reports that I did, and it was the reason I got my own Power BI my own Office 365 tenant, because I ended up putting this on the work tenant, and it wasn't a very smart idea. It was when we were trying to get a puppy. So what does it have to do with storytelling? And I then think, well, it's to do with the brain, and my brain, we love stories, and that's why you should watch this particular video here, and you'll find out a lot about how the brain works and so on. So it's about the brain. So what's the nature of a good story? And so stories are, so we'll see some elements of good stories. I'm not going to wait for this thing to pop up. So the reason why this is here is because if you think about the Premier League, or any league of any kind, it's not it's not it's not one story. It's loads of different stories. And so, telling the story, you can travel through this in many different ways. Matrix is quite a good example of a story, because some of the artifacts of the story itself, how it draws the user in, is really cool. And this is a kind of, I don't know which one's going to come up, but this is an example of probably one of my many reports where if you just blast data at people, then they'll just go like that, and they just won't know what to kind of do with the data and so on. So this is a Premier League thing, but what I've done is I've actually filtered it down to just the lower teams, so it's Bournemouth and a few others, and you can actually see a little bit more about what's going on because it's filtered. This is this idea that I'm kind of drawing people's attention. I actually think that this is, look, I think it's quite revolutionary to combine Power Apps and Power BI in this way. I thoroughly recommend you do it. You know, I probably should try and make loads of money out of it, but I'm not really that bothered. One thing I will mention is that if you want to be able to do an awful lot of this, then you'll see inside this tutorial here, and if you actually go to the Power BI community blog, you'll also see there's a whole blog to do with how this technically works. So I'd recommend you go there. I'm doing things to do with directing people's attention, but even just directing people's attention doesn't necessarily make it a good story. I'm going to jump straight on because I do want to do the I really want to do the Trump thing because it's really interesting. So one, or grab people's attention. How do you grab people's attention? And there are certain things that we can do that mean that you grab the attention better. So here are the tips on some tips on storytelling that I discovered. So Aristotle said the story needs to have a beginning, middle, and an end, but at least you can sort of think about it. It needs to have a beginning. So and we saw with Joseph, we saw the beginning and so on. And what I do is I'll show you a graphic which shows how that story has kind of proceeded, if you like. Knowing your audience, super important, because you know that defines what they are interested in the first place, and whether or not they can cope with, you know, the sort of visuals you might be presenting them with. Story hooks I really like. So this is a little test for the people in the audience. So this, I think the first one's one of my favorite ones. So Shane, you can have a go at this too. In the light of the moon, a little egg lay on a leaf. Now, does anyone know what that what story that came from? Shane, have we got any people that have said where this comes from? It's a book that's about 50 years old that many people would have read when they were children, and it's actually The Hungry Caterpillar. And so it's a very famous book, but it does have a beginning, middle, and end. It's got a load of things that make it an interesting story. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. So I think we all know that this is from Harry Potter, but it is a good story hook. It does bring people in. Scarf, I've written a blog post about the things that get people motivated. I'll just see if it actually tells. Yeah, so the things that get people motivated, and it's one of these mnemonic things. So it's status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So if you, for example, fairness, if you said, oh no, our competitor is doing so much better than us, or they've got patents that we don't have, then it will trigger things emotionally in us that will make us want to engage with the story more. And simple stories, repeatable stories are better and more effective than just long-winded kind of War and Peace type story. So this was a very good example of an effective story. Whether or not you believe it or not, whether or not it's true or not, you know, it was an effective story. And it is hugely repeatable. You can even look on that bus over there. You know, even if you've seen this bus, there might have only been 2 or 3 of them, but that was just everywhere at the time. So and so you can even look at the, you know, the Bible and the Quran. You know, it's full of stories. That's how they tell. That's how they tell it. So Shane, how are we for time?
We have 20 minutes remaining, and while you have a break there, we have a question in. It goes, I understood that it is possible to extend Power BI data in here. What would be a real business case for this Power App storytelling?
I'd really love to be able to talk to them directly. So,
Okay.
well,
Maybe at
no,
the
sorry,
end.
I don't mean that I need to speak to them, but I'm just saying that you take, right, I worked in accounts. You know, I produced financial accounts for years and years and years, and they were the same ones, and they were so boring. They were boring beyond belief. They never told a story because they presented themselves in precisely the same way every time to the same people. So they were not they did not target the audience. So that was a fail. They presented things in the same way, so they were boring. They actually didn't have a beginning and a middle and an end, because doing the profit and loss followed by the balance sheet, followed by, you know, your debtors ledger, followed by your creditors ledger, that's not a story. What you need to do with a story is you need to start by saying, well, actually, we have a problem here, and I can see that the overtime figure for our organization is high this month. And then I need to jump over to the HR Power BI report, so I can then say, actually, we can see what the sickness level was in the month. And then you can sort of say, and you know, you can then start to tell a real story, like the real story that underlies it. And you could then say, well, actually, it was a combination of sickness, and let's go and have a look at the report which relates to recruitment and what vacancies we've got. So the idea that you can actually go from your accounts, say like a true business problem, through to something else, and it could be that you have vacancies that haven't been filled, and then the next question could be, well, actually, what are we doing to fill those vacancies? And it might turn out that, oh, it's just with, you know, we haven't approved the, you know, the vacancy yet, so that's why it's not been done, or maybe the interviews got put back, or whatever it might be. So you know, I need to reach out to you guys. This is something that happens in our industry. That because in our industry, what happens in a lot of cases to people is they get to this industry through a technical route, and because they get to through a technical route, some of those softer skills are not as strong for people, and therefore we try and do technical responses to something, when in reality we need to just be, you know, we need to be doing this storytelling. So I'm kind of hoping that this is going to come out as the presentation goes on. So cool. So are we okay? And any other questions?
Nope, that is it, Rory, for the time being.
So so now I am going to do this Trump one, because I did it this morning actually, and I was kind of surprised. And I was surprised at how interesting I found it. So what I did was I started to think about this. Hopefully this screen's going to change. So I was thinking about the coronavirus. I didn't want to do a story about it, but I thought, well, maybe if I, what would that be? And maybe this is a good response to the question from earlier. So Trump versus COVID-19. You know, he's very generous in providing us with lots of interesting quotes. So a lot of people would have seen this John Hopkins University graphic. So they've done a lot of detail. Now this specific graphic is the one that relates to the United States, and it's the cases. I've not done the deaths and all that sort of thing. I've just literally, it is just an image. It's just a screenshot and so on. But what I'm doing now is I'm kind of plotting the quotes by President Trump against where they were in terms of the cases and so on. So we have it totally under control. Now in close communication with China, then working closely with China, and to be fair, there aren't really that many cases at this point in time. It's a kind of a handful, only 5 people in the US, good recovery, etc. And then March the 6th. Now this is interesting. I like the numbers being where they are. So this was, if we think about a story, like, so basically he liked the numbers where they were, so he didn't want the numbers to change, because he didn't want the people to come off the ship and onto the shore, and that would have made his numbers change. I mean, seems like an odd I mean, lots of people did that sort of thing, but that wouldn't be my rationale, wouldn't be based on the numbers. It would be based on, you know, the kind of medical things. So so this was where he's kind of lauding himself for having done the rating for the best way of holding the virus situation. So this was a case here. So unfortunately, in my latest version, because I don't normally put too much text on these things, but I did in a later version. So I'm just going to go back and just so that we can actually see all of the quotes. So that's Trump versus coronavirus, and it'll be a bit slower on this thing here. Not even sure what this thing is doing here. I'm going to come off that because it's whirring away. So Trump versus coronavirus. Yeah, it's all waking up. Okay, it's struggling with the internet at the moment. So essentially, he was at this point in time suggesting that it wasn't completely serious. Then he was saying how good the border control had been, and then I've always known this was a pandemic. Now look at that. So if you think about the story and what's, you know, so at this point in time, there were a small number of cases, but he's saying he's gone from one set of statements to something which, you know, you might say this was, you know, a very different change in tack. And unfortunately, I don't have the bit in the middle, but at this point in here, he halted funding for the World Health Organization. I think that's an interesting story because there's, you know, this is Actionable Insight. That was his insight, was that the World Health Organization weren't delivering for him. And I think it might, yeah, so this is how well funded it is. So in fact, you can see that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are very high funders for that. And then this and this part of it, in fact, what he did was, and this was yesterday, was he suggested that people could inject disinfectant into their bodies to go after the flu and also do some kind of light beam type things. But look at that. You know, if you just literally looked at that graphic, it does not tell you that story. But overlaying it, you know, does add something to what's going on here. So storytelling. Oh. So now, any questions at this point?
No, Rory, we're all good.
Good. So now I'm going to go on to the second part of this, the technical dream gun. I'm just going to try and I'm going to have to jump through really quickly to get through there. So so I'll just jump through here. What I do is every time I go onto a story, I just start from the beginning. I don't sort of just because the technical way in which it's put together, I do it a particular way using collections and so on. So it makes it less easy for me to jump to a particular point in there. So we jump through the story and we kind of get to the point where we can look at the data. In fact, that was where I was before. There he is, good old Trump. And I wanted to be able to show you the arrows, because the arrows are really important on this. And let's have a nice little pause there. Okay, good. So he's enslaved, he's at a low, and you can actually see those arrows coming in. So I am just going to sort of persevere with this. There's a lot of things spamming in my internet though. So storytelling, and we go on to there. Apologies, just waiting on this to come through. So I'm going to jump through the story now, and I will just whiz through to get to the end, or rather to the second part of the story. This is the beauty of live presentations, isn't it, Shane?
The demo gods aren't with you today, I'm afraid, by the looks of things, Rory.
Well, to be fair, I mean, I think that what we've all sort of found is that because everyone's going from their home internet and all that sort of thing, then everyone's sharing the internet connections anyway. So okay, well, never mind. So I have got a number of versions of this on the go at the same time. So I'm just going to kill a few of these tabs that I've got going on here. Kill that one over there. I won't kill go to webinar because that would be a disaster. So no, it just doesn't love me, this one at the moment. Most confusing. I may have gone a little bit too quick for it. There we are, go with it. I'll just try again. I'll try one more time. Because it is better with the arrows. The whole point of this is to, okay, we've seen the arrows before anyway, so we kind of know that it works. And this thing is crawling through. So by the time he's enslaved, he's at a low. But bear in mind that this is the same graphic. So it's the same graphic, but filtered in a different way. So the idea is that because it's filtered, it's the same graphic filtered in a different way. It has the capacity to tell a story. So what we're going to see in a moment is the story arc, where Joseph's story, the story of Joseph is that he go from left to right. So you can see that he starts off okay, he does quite well. He gets the and he gets the his coat of many colors and so on. But then by the time he's enslaved, he's at an all-time low here. In fact, I'll just show you, I'll just hover over this thing here because it is quite cool that you can actually, in the tooltip for it, you can actually see the photo that is in there as well. I think that's really neat. So just moving on, so he's sent to jail, etc. All is not lost. And so essentially he is able to interpret dreams, and so he gets put in front of the Pharaoh. And I think this one here, this is interesting because he explains the Pharaoh's dreams, and it's essentially 7 fat cows, 7 skinny cows. But if he interprets them for him. But if we looked at the visual in terms of Power BI, then this is the nature of the harvests that took place. So essentially we have a series of really bumper harvests that come through, and what we'll see, I think I've just got about 3 of them. 3 years, 1, 2, 3, great harvest, wonderful, and so on. And when the first poor harvests are recorded, then the preparations have been made. Essentially, they've put stuff back and so on. So it's not so bad. And by the time they get to the end of the famine, Egypt is still able to continue. Whereas if they hadn't had the foresight of this theoretical visual, which Joseph gave them by interpreting the dream, then they would not have been able to have their actionable insight. But this is a kind of visual version of that. So Joseph's multicolored coat is returned to him, and his story from rags to riches is complete, or rather it's from riches to rags to riches. And what we're going to see in a moment is the full story arc for Pharaoh. So what we'll see here is we'll see the beginning section. So we're looking here at the beginning section, so the beginning, the middle, and the end of the story, and we can actually start looking at turning points and so on. And I think this visual is very interesting because it's got this idea that you can actually hover over it, and I'm leveraging the fact that our minds are very interesting, and they're able to interpret things very effectively, and so I can use your mind so that you can kind of repeat. There's a little bit of repetition going on here, and we see that by the end of the story that he is at a higher point, and my kind of storytelling plus Power BI plus Power Apps journey here is complete. So that takes us to the end, roughly. Speaking of the presentation, I'm looking at the time here. We're kind of good for time. So do we have any questions at this point in time, Shane?
Yeah, Rory, we have one here. It goes, storytelling from a communication perspective would require feedback. Any feedback capabilities you would suggest for storytelling in general, of this app in particular?
I mean, yes. I mean, I think because it's an app, you know, and the nature of Power BI, it is I'm gonna call it a dumb reader. Like, it just reads stuff. Like, you can't actually interact other than interact with it. You can't. It's not as easy to kind of say, hey, I looked at this and so on. Whereas you could, in a scenario like this, to say, actually, look at this intersection, look at this page and this report, da da da. Of course, you wouldn't be actually telling them that. You would actually be saying, to them, sorry, there's the dog going. So what you'd be saying to them is that, look at this report here, and effectively you would be sending them the URL of that intersection and then saying to them, I don't understand this. I think that what it does is it offers up some really new and interesting possibilities for feedback. And I have seen people do this before, where they've got their financial report and they've also got a Power BI, a Power App next to it, where they can actually, in their Power App, then sort of say, query, you know, certain variances and so on. So I think that I totally agree that in a business scenario, it's really important to be able to do the feedback loop, so that you can then, you know, maybe change your story or whatever it might be. Yeah, good question.
Exactly. Okay, and that's the question so far, Rory.
Cool. Would anyone like for me to show them how Power BI, how you use Power BI tiles at all in the couple of minutes that remain?
Go for it, Rory. Yeah, we've got a few minutes.
Is there a kind of what does it? Is there a session after this, by the way?
No, this is the only session today.
Yeah, thought so. Okay, so I'm just going to go insert new screen. I'm going to put in a blank screen, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go on to the charts and Power BI tile. I'm going to grab a tile here, and what it'll do for you the first time off is it'll say, hey, you do want to connect to a workspace and a dashboard and a tile and so on. But actually, I don't do any of those things, especially as it doesn't work very well. Yeah, so you would connect to a dashboard, but actually dashboards aren't particularly interesting. For me, what is much more interesting is something like, and this is like the noddy version of, so if I go to Power, let me just go to Power BI, Power BI, Microsoft.com, that'll do. Okay, it's not going to get me to the right place, I don't think. Let me just jump onto Office. What essentially I'm going to do is I'm going to jump onto Power BI, grab a URL, and then just pump it into the Power BI report. So I'm going to jump onto Power BI, and I'm just going to pick up any report. It doesn't really matter what report I do, but I just want to show you this technique, because even if you don't do all of the whizzy stuff, you can still get your report into Power Apps, which is still, you know, I think is still a prize worth fighting for. So just waiting for this thing to pop up. Everything is on the go here. What's this thing doing? I'm going to kill that one. I don't need this one anymore. I'm just going to wait for Power BI to load. You can see that this has got 101 notifications. Lovely. So I'm just going to jump straight into, this is obviously a dashboard, and it'll just take me directly to a report of some kind. So hopefully I will get myself to report. Lovely. I'm on a report now, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you that what you can do is you can go to these three dots here, go to the more options, and you have to do embed in a website or portal. This is the important bit. So website or portal, I'm going to get a URL here, and I've just copied that, go back to the Canvas app, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to tile URL, and then inside the quotes, I'm just going to basically put the put what was should work, by the way, and basically this will work. You know, the way in which I work is more complex, so I add filters and so on to the report. So this is just a kind of vanilla report that you're going to get out there. But you can, is this interesting to people? I kind of hope it is. You know, can I get a thumbs up for something like this? Because, you know, Power BI can't really do this. You couldn't, you know, if you copy and paste this, you can have two Power BI reports on the same page that don't even relate to each other in different workspaces. You know, there you go. There's the next report. So, you know, you've got really interesting possibilities, you know, in terms of how you relate those two things to each other. So, yeah. So thank you very much, everyone, for sticking with the presentation. I do hope that you bring some of the learning that's come from this and into your reports and your thinking. And one thing I will just do is I'm going to do a final plug, but it's actually of a competition that I'm running, and it's for children. And it's actually, ironically, it is a Power Apps storytelling competition. So what I've done is I've built an app that allows any child to write their own story. And all you do is you submit it to me, and because it'll be cool, and it's an iPad shaped app that they'll get to build. It's all completely free, so I would encourage you to take a look at the competition. It's going to be, I'm giving people until Saturday of next week to complete it. So lovely. Thank you everyone for your time, and do enjoy the rest of your day.
On behalf of the ESPC community, thank you, Rory, for taking the time today to complete this webinar. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone.
Okay, so bear with me here for one moment. And a big thank you to Rory again. I'll just get everything back and running. Okay, this is the end of today's webinar. Please see sharepointeurope.com for further details of all upcoming webinars, or visit our resource center for all previous episodes. A big thank you to Rory Neary today for joining us, and thank you all for joining us as well. Take care and goodbye.